What if I told you that right now, before the 2026 season even begins, there are fantasy football teams already doomed to fail, and their owners don't even realize it yet? Not because of injuries, not because of bad luck, but because of something far more dangerous, something almost invisible to the average fantasy player: coaching changes. See, every single year, the NFL changes. New coaches arrive, old systems disappear, philosophies shift overnight. And with those changes, fantasy football is quietly rewritten. But here's the scary part. Most people never adjust. They draft based on last year. They follow outdated rankings. They trust big names without questioning the system those players are stepping into. And that's exactly why they lose. Because in reality, fantasy football is not about talent alone, it's about opportunity, and opportunity is controlled by coaching. A new offensive coordinator doesn't just call plays, he changes careers. He decides who gets the ball, who gets ignored, who becomes a star, and who disappears. And in 2026, some of these coaching changes are so drastic, they could completely flip the fantasy landscape upside down. We're talking about offenses shifting from run-heavy to pass-heavy overnight, quarterbacks losing volume, running backs losing touches, wide receivers going from irrelevant to unstoppable. And if you're not paying attention, you won't see it coming until it's too late. Let's break this down in a way most people never do. Imagine a team that ranked top 5 in rushing last season. Their running back was a fantasy monster. Everyone is expecting the same thing again. But then a new coach comes in. A coach known for aggressive passing, fast tempo, and spreading the ball. Suddenly, that same running back is getting fewer carries, fewer red zone opportunities, and less overall usage. His name is still big. His hype is still high. But his production? It drops. And fantasy managers who drafted him early are left confused, frustrated, and stuck. On the flip side, imagine a wide receiver who was barely relevant last year. Limited targets, low production, no hype. But now, a new system arrives. One that focuses on quick passes, high volume, and constant pressure on defenses. Suddenly, that same receiver is getting 8, 10, even 12 targets a game. He becomes consistent, reliable, dangerous. And the people who saw it early? They win. This is the hidden layer of fantasy football. The layer most people ignore. The layer that decides championships. Because coaching doesn't just affect one player, it affects the entire ecosystem of a team. The quarterback's confidence, the offensive line scheme, the pace of the game, the number of plays per drive. Everything changes. And here's where it gets even deeper. Not all coaching changes are obvious. Some are subtle. A slight shift in philosophy. A new play caller with a different mindset. A change in how players are rotated. These small details can create massive fantasy impact. For example, a coach who prefers committee backfields can destroy the value of a single dominant running back. A coordinator who spreads the ball evenly can limit the upside of a star wide receiver. And a conservative play caller can cap the ceiling of an otherwise explosive offense. This is why blindly trusting talent is one of the biggest mistakes in fantasy football. Because talent without opportunity is useless. And opportunity is fragile. It can disappear with one decision. One game plan, one coach. Now, let's talk about something even more dangerous: hype. Because hype is where most fantasy players get trapped. They see highlights. They hear analysts. They follow trends. And they assume that what happened before will happen again. But coaching changes break that pattern. They create unpredictability. They create chaos. And in that chaos, there is opportunity. The smartest fantasy players don't avoid chaos. They understand it. They study it. They use it. They look at coaching tendencies, historical patterns, play-calling styles. They ask questions others don't. Will this coach increase tempo? Will he favor short passes or deep shots? Will he rely on one star player or spread the workload? These questions matter more than rankings, more than projections, more than opinions, because they reveal the truth behind the numbers. And the truth is, fantasy football is a game of information. The more you understand what's happening behind the scenes, the more advantage you gain. And in 2026, that advantage is bigger than ever. Because the league is evolving. faster offenses, smarter defenses, more specialized roles. And coaching is at the center of it all. Some teams are embracing speed, increasing plays per game, maximizing possessions. Others are slowing things down, controlling the clock, limiting risk. And these decisions directly impact fantasy output. More plays mean more chances to score. Fewer plays mean limited opportunity. It's that simple. But most people don't think about it. They just draft. And hope. But hope is not a strategy. Understanding is. And if you truly want to dominate your league this year, you need to shift your mindset. Stop thinking like a casual player. Start thinking like an analyst. Look beyond the surface. Look beyond the names. Focus on the system. Because the system tells the real story. The system shows you who will rise and who will fall. And if you get it right, you won't just have a good team, you'll have an unstoppable one. A team that consistently scores. A team that adapts. A team that wins when it matters most. But if you ignore it, if you follow the crowd, if you trust outdated information, then your season might be over before it even begins. That's the reality of fantasy football in 2026. It's not just about picking players. It's about understanding change. And right now, the biggest change happening in the NFL is coaching. So the question is simple. Are you going to see it coming, or are you going to be another victim of it? Because when the season starts and those unexpected breakouts begin and those surprising busts happen, the difference between winners and losers will already be decided. Not on the field, but in the mind, in the preparation, in the understanding of something most people ignored. Coaching changes. And if you use this knowledge the right way, you won't just compete this season, you'll dominate it like never before. And here's where things get even more dangerous, because most fantasy players think once they understand the basics of coaching changes, they're safe. But they're not. Because the real advantage comes from predicting what others still can't see. Let me explain. Every coach has tendencies, patterns that show up again and again no matter what team they're with. Some coaches love to establish the run early, even when it's not working. Others abandon the run completely and rely on quick passing. Some prefer one elite target, feeding him constantly, while others spread the ball so much that no single player becomes reliable. If you can identify these patterns early, before the season even starts, you're already ahead of 90% of your league. Now imagine this scenario. A new offensive coordinator comes in with a history of targeting slot receivers heavily. Last season, that team's slot receiver was average at best. Nobody is paying attention to him. But now, in this new system, he could become a target machine. Easy receptions, consistent yards, high PPR value. And yet, most people will ignore him on draft day because they're stuck thinking about last year. This is how league winners are created. Not by following rankings, but by understanding change before it becomes obvious. And it goes even deeper. Because coaching doesn't just affect skill players, it affects game flow itself. A team that plays faster will have more possessions. More possessions mean more chances to score. More chances to score mean more fantasy points. On the other hand, a slow, methodical team might control the clock, limit turnovers, and win games, but destroy fantasy value in the process. That's something most people don't understand. Winning in real football does not always mean winning in fantasy football. In fact, sometimes the best real-life teams are terrible for fantasy because they don't produce enough volume. So you have to separate the two. You have to stop thinking like a fan and start thinking like a strategist. Another hidden factor that coaching changes bring is trust. Coaches trust certain types of players. Veterans over rookies. Reliable players over explosive ones. Or sometimes the opposite. A new coach might come in and completely change the depth chart simply because he believes in a different skill set. Suddenly, a backup becomes a starter. A starter loses snaps. And fantasy managers who didn't see it coming are left confused. This is why preseason reports, training camp news, and early usage patterns become extremely important. They give you clues. Not the full picture, but enough to see where things are going. And if you connect those clues with coaching tendencies, you start to see the future before it happens. That's the real edge. And here's something almost nobody talks about: pressure. New coaches come in with something to prove. They want results fast. They want to show their system works. And that often leads to aggressive decisions. More passing, more risks, more creative play calling, which can be incredible for fantasy production. But it can also backfire, because aggressive systems can be inconsistent. Big games followed by quiet ones. Explosive performances followed by disappointment. And if you're not prepared for that volatility, it can hurt your team. So now the question becomes, how do you actually use all of this information? The answer is simple but powerful. You build your team with balance. You take advantage of high upside players in strong systems, but you also secure consistency where it matters. You don't go all in on hype, and you don't ignore opportunity. You find the middle ground, the smart ground, because championships are not won by taking random risks, they're won by calculated decisions, by understanding where the value is before everyone else sees it. And as the 2026 season gets closer, the gap between informed players and casual players will only grow. Some people will keep following outdated advice. Others will adapt. They'll study. They'll prepare. And when draft day arrives, they'll already know what others are still trying to figure out. And when the season begins and those unexpected performances start happening, they won't be surprised. They'll be ready because they understood something most people ignored. That coaching changes are not just news, they are the foundation of everything that happens next. So remember this, don't just watch the players. Watch the system. Don't just follow the hype. Follow the opportunity. And don't just play fantasy football, control it. Because if you truly understand coaching changes in 2026, you're not just playing the game anymore, you're staying ahead of it.
Please like and subscribe my YouTube channel. Thanks.